Hi, and welcome to this edition of Extension Live. I'm Bob Schuster. For the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to discuss an ongoing issue involving farmers and tall fescue. Tall fescue is a popular grass used for grazing, hay, and erosion control in eastern United States. But experts believe this grass could be responsible for more than $1 billion a year in livestock production losses. $1 billion. Clemson experts warn livestock producers to protect their herds from a fungus found in some tall fescue. To help South Carolina livestock owners learn management techniques and how to replant their pastures with a new non-toxic fescue, the Clemson Cooperative Extension Service and other institutions are teaming up with the Alliance for Grassland Renewal to hold one-day workshops for producers in 5 states in 2018. We'll talk about these workshops in just a few minutes. But let me introduce you to Dr. John Andre, forage specialist and director of the Clemson Research and Experimental Station, or Education Center here on Clemson's campus, to help sort us all these things out. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
First, let's dive into this thing. First off, tell us, tall fescue. What is it? What's the problem?
Tall fescue is it's probably the most important cool season perennial forage in the United States. It's on over 30 million acres, and really concentrated in our area of the country. Almost all of those acres are in a what's called the tall fescue belt, which ranges from central southern Missouri down into northern South Carolina, northern Georgia, northern Alabama. It's an incredibly useful grass. A lot of fall and winter production, so it really cuts out our hay needs. Very drought tolerant, very grazing tolerant, and so it's an incredibly useful grass. It's here for a reason. The problem with that grass is
there's always a problem.
There's always a
sure
an issue, and that's that this grass has a fungus growing in it, in between the plant cells, inside the plant. You can't see it with a naked eye. You can't walk out into your pasture and tell if it's a toxic tall fescue plant, but that fungus produces compounds that are toxic to animals. Those compounds are actually quite similar to LSD. So it's and those toxicity issues create that $1 billion loss to the beef cattle industry alone.
Yeah. Now, it's not something new.
No,
We've known about it for a while. Thought we had it fixed out.
Yeah.
Go back there and let's discuss it.
Fescue is relatively new to the U.S., compared to some other forages, but it was released. Tall fescue was released as a forage by the University of Kentucky in the 40s.
Just blame it on the Bluegrass Day, right?
It's Kentucky's problem. So that was discovered in 1931 on a farm in eastern Kentucky by a county agent, by extension, and Mr. Fergus realized all the benefits of this plant. It was tough. It grew in the winter. It survived heavy grazing, and Kentucky released this. Again, he discovered it in 1931. That's the Kentucky 31 variety that's still in place today, and that was released widely through the U.S. A lot of South Carolina producers, Alabama, Georgia producers actually produced seed of this variety in the 60s, 70s, and made a good bit of money producing seed in this region. We discovered it was toxic, didn't really know why until the 80s, and figured out this fungus was producing the toxins. And pretty simple, right? You take the fungus out, the problem goes away. So we did that. We, being the land grant system, did that. Auburn was the first to release that. AU Triumph was that variety. Pulled that fungus out, no toxicity problems, no issues whatsoever, except in a couple years those stands started to die, and the fescue went away. And we figured out, hey, that fungus is responsible for introducing grazing tolerance to the plant, introducing pest resistance like nematodes and some insects to that plant, and drought and grazing tolerance. So it's the fungus is there for a reason. Nature has reasons for including.
Do we know what alerted us to the issue at first in the 80s? What the problem was? Did you see a loss in production of cattle? Or?
I think there were reports in the late 50s, early 60s that things weren't quite right with this. Cattle had rough hair coats, for example. gains weren't nearly as high on these tall fescue plants as they were in orchard grass and other forages. So they knew there was an issue. They just didn't know what. So there was this huge detective, mystery
Expect a clue.
yeah, what's going on?
Yeah, right.
And so they were, and it's not an easy thing to find. This again, nobody suspected a fungus really, and that fungus, most of those funguses that you see on cereal rye or other things are obvious. They grow on the seed heads, or they erupt out of the side of the plant. This fungus lives entirely inside the plant for its entire life cycle. So there's no signs of there being a fungus there. So it was a hard nut to crack.
Yeah,
to
sure.
find what was going on.
So 86 years of toxic grasses has been in the works. Now all of a sudden we're back to, okay, we got to figure out what's going on here again. Let's get together and see what we can do.
Yeah, well,
that's where we are now. Right?
That's where we are now. And so they took that fungus out. It failed. The plants failed. A lot of people spent a lot of money killing toxic fescue, planting endophyte-free, fungus-free fescue, and that fescue, of course, at least in this part of the country, failed. It died. So a lot of people are out a lot of money. Now that works further up in the upper Midwest, southern Wisconsin, northern Missouri, those types of areas. But the people in the South had no options. That fungus-free didn't work. So about the late 90s, scientists at the University of Georgia and in cooperation with New Zealand found a solution. So
back to the drawing table they went and figured out what they needed to do.
Yeah. Some really bright people in New Zealand. This is one of those things at a meeting somewhere. A fescue breeder, a tall fescue breeder from Georgia, met up with Dr. Joe Boughton, met up with an endophyte, a plant pathologist or an endophyte person from New Zealand who had a worldwide collection of these funguses. And just by chance, one guy said, I've got these funguses that don't produce toxins. And the plant breeder said, wow, I've got these varieties that I think they would work really well in. And so a marriage was born, and it wasn't easy. It took several years and a lot of money to figure it out, but they finally lit on marrying the right endophytes, non-toxic endophytes, with the right tall fescue varieties, and they were off to the races. So now we've got a fescue with that fungus in it that doesn't produce the toxic problems, but has those drought tolerance traits and grazing persistence traits that the endophyte-free plants didn't. It's like the perfect, the perfect marriage of those traits.
Most people in my world collect press credentials. This guy's collecting bacteria and funguses.
Funguses
and stuff.
Yeah. And
so now we haven't completely eradicated this disease, but we've got it under control now, we think.
We've got a solution.
Yes.
Yeah. If you use a flu analogy, there's plenty of flu out there.
Yep.
We gotta eradicate some of these pastures.
Okay.
So,
let's talk about how it's affecting not just livestock. I mean, well, all sorts of cattle, horses, goats. Talk about how it's affecting those.
Sure. The biggest economic impacts in South Carolina and really in the United States are with beef cattle. It's because beef cattle are grazing these 30 million acres. So the $1 billion in losses are due mainly to decreased conception rates. So cattle grazing this pure toxic tall fescue in a controlled breeding season, controlled 90-day breeding season, may have conception rates I've seen in the high 40s. We've had research here at Clemson that had 44% conception rates on 100% toxic fescue. But even with clovers and crabgrass and some other dilutants of that toxin, you can still have 20-30% reduction in conception rates. That's a huge economic loss to beef cattle, and we've seen decreased weaning weights anywhere from 40 to 70 pounds in some cases.
Wow.
So that's
significant.
Yeah, at $1.40 a pound this year, that's over $100 a calf if you get 70 pounds lost weaning weight.
Yeah.
So beef cattle really are driving the economics here. But hey, it affects, these toxins affect particularly brood mares, mares carrying foals. They severely impact those brood mares. Not as much horses that aren't pregnant, just growing growing horses, but mares carrying foals, those mares tend to carry those foals a lot longer. They have real thick placentas, red bags, and they don't drop milk. So a lot of times those foals will, well, 80% of the time, if you leave these mares on toxic tall fescue, they'll lose the foal. So and the horse people have figured this out, and they've eliminated tall fescue altogether. Or they provide domperidone, which was developed here at Clemson to help offset those effects. So there are solutions there, but it's serious with mares and foals.
So I would think, especially in Kentucky, now they're doing away with that tall fescue.
Yeah.
Altogether, these horse farms, that's big horse country, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm not in Kentucky, but I'm sure those big horse farms in Kentucky have gone to bluegrass, orchard grass,
I would think
Timothy,
so.
other options.
I would assume you're not a numbers guy, but is there a way to put a thumbprint on the economic impact, what it means just to South Carolina? I know it's $1 billion overall throughout the country.
Yeah, it's $1 billion to the U.S. And really, I should figure out how many cattle are in the tall fescue county. You know, we can look at the county: Anderson County, Oconee County, Pickens County, Newberry County. There are some big cattle counties that have predominantly tall fescue. I've not figured that out. It's hard to even get a number even on how many acres of toxic tall fescue we have in the state, but it's several 100,000. So the impacts are significant.
Oh, sure. I don't mean to be damning the tall fescue people, but is there maybe a better grass that could be brought into this fold? I mean, is it to that point where it's like maybe we need to start looking at other options?
That's sort of what's happened over time. As some of these you get a drought year and the toxic fescue thins, and crabgrass and Bermuda grass and Dallas grass and some of these warm season grasses fill in. Those are great diluents, particularly in the hot summer months when these animals are suffering from the tall fescue toxicosis. But as far as those grasses, all the grasses I just named don't produce any forage as it gets cold in the fall through the winter months and early spring. So you've got all those months you need to feed hay. We can plant orchard grass and Timothy and other cool season perennials here, but they're not going to make it. We're just too severe of an environment for those species. Yeah. So tall fescues are.
It's important.
It's an important forage species. It's here for a reason.
Yep, here for a reason. Okay, so now that moves me to what we're here for, because now you guys have developed this workshop, if you will. I know we've got a little graphic of the workshop coming up. Tell us a little about it. I think it's called the Novell Tall Fescue Renovation Workshop.
Yeah,
up in March.
I mentioned that scientist in New Zealand that had the fungus collection. These are these novel endophytes that don't produce toxins but produce other compounds that help the plant. We can't plant orchard grass. We can't get orchard grass or Timothy and these cool season species to survive here, but we can get tall fescue to survive if it's got an endophyte in it. So, these new, I keep saying new, but they were new when I was a new forage specialist in 2000. They were just released then. We've got these novel endophyte containing tall fescues that will survive here, that don't produce those toxins, so we can get that increased animal performance with these animals with tall fescue. So this workshop is gonna educate people about these new tall fescues. Seed companies have helped put this on. We'll have about 15 different endophyte fescue combinations for them to look at in the field. All the commercially available tall fescues that are on the market, we'll show those producers those tall fescues. We'll teach them how to replace their toxic fescue with non-toxic fescue. And for those acres that they can't replace, whether that's rented land or steep land or as they transition, we'll teach them how to manage that existing toxic tall fescue to make it less toxic, whether adding clover, that type of thing.
Is this going to be an expense to the farmer, and is there going to be some subsidies through the government that may help them redo some of this?
There are some cost share options in converting this. We'll have Jill Clausen with our state grazing lands specialist with NRCS at the workshop to talk about those cost share options at this workshop. So she'll be on hand during the lunch hour to talk about potential cost shares. But really, with the economic impacts on with decreased production, this thing really pays for itself.
Oh yeah,
as well.
it's going to pay for itself
Yes.
over the long haul, because people are going to say, hey, if I don't do this, I'm going to lose more cattle.
Yeah, if you've got a 50 or 60% conception rate in your beef herd, this thing will pay for itself in 2, 3, 4 years.
Oh yeah,
and that's another impact of this workshop. We'll have an economic section of this workshop with. There's been a group of 4 or 5 ag economists and forage specialists developing a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, that will provide to attendants that they can punch in their production costs, they can punch in their conception rates, weaning weights, and it'll give them an economic analysis, a time to payback on these conversions as well.
And you've guys got some people coming from Missouri, from North Carolina State. So I mean,
We do.
the country is going to be well represented here at this workshop.
This is a stout workshop.
Yes.
We've got and there's 5 in the U.S. They're going to start in Missouri on March 6th. So if anybody's watching Missouri, Kentucky March 8th, then they'll come to South Carolina the following Tuesday. They'll be here near Clemson at the Center for Applied Technologies on Westinghouse Road in Pendleton. Then they'll go to Raleigh the next day, and then Rafine, Virginia, up in the upper part of the Shenandoah Valley for the last workshop. So 5 workshops this year. I think there'll be 6 next year. Will also be on the list in 2019. So if you can't come this year, put it on your calendar for next year.
What's the number one hope, if you will, to come out of this workshop?
Mainly, my biggest hope is for people to realize they have a problem.
Do they not see that?
Well, it's very easy not to realize that you've got a toxicity problem. If your cows look like your neighbor's cows and they look like the cows down the road,
Yeah.
everyone's cattle has rough hair coat. I don't have a pasture problem. If I've got it, everybody's got it. Well, everybody's got it. So some people don't realize that this problem is so severe. Also, if you've got an extended calving season, if you're calving 4, 5, 6, 12 months out of the year, those cows will catch eventually and get bred. And you may think, well, all my cows are having calves. Well, they are, but it's over a long time period, and you do have a problem. So getting the word out, getting people to realize they've got a problem, getting people, in this workshop, we'll look at that fungus through a microscope, and you'll see it. It becomes not an imaginary problem, but a tangible problem that you can see with your own eyes. And then hopefully we can convince some people to convert with these new varieties.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the land-grant universities are probably doing their job right now at high-level communicators that they are, especially in South Carolina, the Clemson being a land-grant university, that all the extension agents are out there with their cattle farmers saying, hey guys, this is going on.
Yep.
Here's a workshop that's going to be available. I think you need to come. Maybe you farmers over here with 2 or 3 pieces of cattle might not, but you guys over here with 200, 300 head of cattle, you probably need to come to this workshop.
Yeah, and we'll have agents there. We'll also have some producers there who have converted their toxic fescue to non-toxic fescue, and they'll share their successes and they'll share their problems with that as well. This isn't simple to do. There are some things you need to consider as you take land out of production, and there's some hay needs or other things you have to consider when you do this. So these producers will give their real world experiences.
Do we have any online data at this point knowing how well this conversion has helped so far, or are we still too early in the process for that?
Well, those producers will give their data, and that was the 70-pound increase.
So don't give it away right here is what you're saying.
It's a positive impact, a dramatic positive impact. And you don't have to convert. That's another thing that'll come out of this, I think, is people think, well, I've got to convert my whole farm in 1 year from toxic to non-toxic. That's not true at all. If you can eventually get to just converting a quarter of your farm from toxic to non-toxic fescue, that can make incredible impacts on your conception rates as well, and incredible economic impacts. So this isn't an all or none issue. There are ways that you can phase this in, and you don't have to phase all the way in, particularly if you have rented land. It's hard to go in and spend a couple $100 an acre on land that you may not be able to graze next year. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about all those things in the entire system in this workshop.
Who in particular, John, are we trying to market for this workshop? farmers mostly, but farm managers. Who else in particular?
If you're a beef cattle producer with tall fescue, and
come on,
it's important. If you're a sheep or goat producer, there are fewer of those, but it impacts them as well. That's another impact that we can address. If you're a horse producer that's breeding mares, this is something you can attend. We don't typically focus on an animal species. This is a grass workshop, but we'll talk about these livestock species. So really, any species that's impacted by tall fescue will gain from this. It will be geared more toward beef producers just because that's our predominant audience, but anyone with horses, sheep, goats, beef cattle, dairy cattle can benefit from this. I left out dairy. I didn't mean to do that, but that's not many people graze dairy cows anymore, but this decreases milk production about 25% in dairy cattle and beef cattle and sheep. We've got data on that from sheep as well. So,
John, you've got an extremely important month coming up leading into this workshop. I think it's important for the farmers to know. I think it's important for our extension agents to get out there and get the word out that this workshop is available, that it's coming. I know you've got about 40 slots available. Is that going to be enough?
It's going to. I hope it fills up. We've got 40 slots. We've got about 15 committed right now. 40 slots plus the speakers, so there'll be 50 people in the room.
Sure.
But there's about 25 slots left and about a month to go, and I expect it to fill. So please give us a call, go online and register. We've got a couple different options with that.
I think we've got a graphic on screen that'll tell us where we can go and register, but give us the who, what, when, where from the workshop at March 13th?
March 13th in Pendleton, South Carolina, near the old Intox building. It's in the CAT building, Center for Applied Technology, 511 Westinghouse Road at Pendleton. We can register. You can register online through Eventbrite. This is my first experience with Eventbrite, so it's on the screen.
It's on the screen right there.
Or you can call in if you prefer to call in. You can call Jennifer Arblaster at that number as well, 864-656-2530. So.
John, it's been enlightening. Alliance for Grassland Renewal. It's the workshop. A lot of states are going to be involved in this in these workshops, and Clemson's big day is going to be March 13th, coming up extremely soon. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Appreciate you giving us a little information on this, and look forward to seeing how the workshop comes
Great.
to.
Thanks, Bob.
Comes to full. Hey, we appreciate you joining us today, and look forward to seeing you on the next Extension Live. Thanks.